Hi, and welcome to the Complaining Cow Consumer Show on East London Radio. And today I have Kekezza Reece with me, who is an acceptance and adaptation coach. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I want to just say, first of all, to Kekezza, welcome and thank you for joining us. And I came across Kekezza last week when I came across a social media post that she did. So we're going to start with that. So Kekezza, tell me all about how you and I got in contact.
Yes, the boots photo.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly how I thought I'd go viral, but I'll be known as the parking lady forever and ever now. I pulled up to Boots, as you do, to buy your supplies, like you do. And we happened to park in the space right in front of this massive sign that used to say disabled parking and now at that point said less abled. I can't even tell you how bad that is in English. Less abled parking. And I think for a moment, I literally looked at the sign and just blinked because I wasn't quite sure I'd read it right. You know, when you go somewhere all the time and it's the same all the time, and you don't really notice it anymore. And then I did have to read it a few times. And then I can remember just thinking, I can't believe they've called me less.
Yeah.
I can't say I actually cried. I mean, I am perimenopausal, but I did feel absolutely all the wind taken out my sails for a moment.
And so tell listeners what you did when you saw that sign.
I took my phone out and took a picture.
As one does.
Like you do. When you're not quite sure or quite believe that you've seen what you've seen, I took a picture so I knew I'd caught it. Then I went into Boots and got my hair bleach because I dye my hair, it's like green and purple. And got back in the car to be presented by the sign again, because obviously it's right in front of the windscreen. And at that point, I think my brain had caught up and the rage absolutely was breathtaking. And I think the anger was where I eventually pasted it. It took me 2 weeks. It actually took me 2 weeks from taking the photograph to have calmed myself down enough to write something fairly coherent on LinkedIn and then later on Twitter. Because of all the things you could call a disabled person, I don't think less had ever entered into my thought process that a company could ever think that was on any stretch of any imagination appropriate. Oh, and I can feel the anger coming back now. I still to this day cannot understand what they were thinking.
It was quite incredible, wasn't it? Because when I came across it, I think someone else had shared it.
Yep.
And so it was all sort of going viral all over the place. And in general, most people were in agreement and giving out examples of how and why it was just not appropriate. And what I noticed was the only people that just went, oh, does it really matter? Of course, were people who were not disabled themselves.
Yes.
You know, they just
that
seem to get it.
And bear in mind, we were Thursday and it's only put the tweet up and the post last Friday, categorically across the board. Everybody who is within the disabled community classes themselves as disabled or recognizes their attachment within the disability community have all gone, they said, what? Everybody else, and I'm including those that are what I would class as disabled, but they don't feel comfortable using the word, have gone, well, I quite like it. Or I don't see what the big deal is, or but aren't you less abled? And
what was your response to those people?
Well, one, I've never been less ever. I'm not that kind of person to have ever been called less anything. I mean, even about the age of 4 or 5, I was called a loudmouth. And then you've got those that are clearly disabled, but don't feel comfortable calling themselves disabled. I find those are the ones that you can have a genuine conversation with. Because I think deep down, I think they know they are, but there's this uncomfortableness around disability that is, I mean, we're talking centuries old at this point. It's so fully ingrained within our society that I don't think people even realize that's what they're dealing with. Is you've got external ableism, which is quite obvious, like the sign. And then you've got this internalized ableism, which everybody has. I have it. Everybody has it. Where you subconsciously, because of all the messages we get our entire lives, subconsciously think we are worth less because in some way we are prevented from being able to fully take part in anything we could ever possibly imagine doing. I think that's why I went into coaching. Actually, there's very little I can't do. Obviously, I'm never going to climb a flight of stairs. But the things that I want to do, nothing actually stops me from doing that. My quality of life is phenomenal. I own my own house. I have children. I'm married. I've got a gorgeous dog. I run a business. I've always run my own business since I was about 19. There's nothing that I can think of that I want to do that I can't figure out how to do it.
It was quite interesting, wasn't it, on some of the ones that quite a few people sort of said, what is this about less able? I assume it means less able to actually park.
Yes, I honestly, the sense of humour some people had was absolutely phenomenal. And that's usually people within the community. I had a lot of that on Twitter. Is the conversation then turned to, if it's less abled parking, it must be how you can't reverse. Not like you're on reverse in the park space anyway, because bollards.
Yeah, I mean that was then on another one that we saw, wasn't it? That actually you couldn't get a wheelchair.
You wouldn't be able to get a wheelchair
anyway.
between the bollards. They were like every meter along this car park, and they had the same sign, although apparently it's now been changed.
So let's get back to sort of what happened after your tweets went viral. What then happened?
I got this template response from Boots, which clearly someone had designed this as the answer, and then they was copied and pasted to everybody everywhere. Anybody who shared the photograph got this image. Boots asked me for my email address, which I gave them on Twitter. I got a reference number, which is apparently my complaints number, and that's it from Boots.
Yeah, now that message was copied and pasted. I mean, in fact, I got it when I emailed the press office for a comment for when I wrote the story up. I got that same copy and paste, because that was copy and pasted to everybody who shared your photo, or in fact took your photo.
Because as soon as you realise it's a template answer, it's meaningless. And then you've got this fact but that wasn't my question. My question wasn't, are you going to change the sign? Because quite clearly at this point you are going to be changing the sign because the photograph's gone viral. But the question then, when you find out it's not the only one that's listed as less abled, they put up more than one sign, which means this is a national decision and not a local one. This is a branding thing. So this is when you start thinking the branding of Boots is, branding wise, they've decided to, instead of have disabled parking, they're going to have less abled parking. And I presume their thinking was to allow more people to be able to use these spaces, which is all very well and good, but I'm in a frigging wheelchair. If somebody who decides that they're slightly less abled than their next door neighbour and use the space, which is wider for a reason, so I can get my door open, I can get in my wheelchair beside my door so I can actually get out of my car, I'm now stuck in a position where I can't go to Boots to pick up my prescription, my hair dye, my vitamins, because anybody that then decides that they are slightly less able than somebody else can use the parking, and it becomes so watered down as to be completely meaningless.
Yeah, it was really quite ridiculous. And that sort of statement sort of said that, but the fact that they said there wasn't a national thing, and then you found another photo which they then said that sign had been removed a year ago and it was taken from Google Maps and it now no longer exists. But it does show that actually they're saying that it wasn't a national thing. It went against that, because clearly it was at some point, and we'll probably find signs other places. So why wasn't the one that you spotted taken down at the same time as the other one was taken down? I realised it was wrong then.
I think we later found out the other one had been removed a year ago, which means for a year, they've known that this sign is not correct. So do they not have a list of where they put all their signs up? How organised is Boots? Does Boots know what one hand is doing when the other hand's waving? This is astonishing from such a big company.
It is, isn't it? It is quite incredible how they just didn't do an audit and say, right, let's just do a sweep here. Let's just check. I mean, I wonder why they removed that one. Was that from a complaint? And then they just thought, oh, we'll just change this one. And then they didn't think, actually, let's go and check all of the others. Yeah. Because it made it sound like it was a store decision, didn't they? And yet clearly it wasn't.
No, exactly. We were originally led to believe that this was just something that happened at Norwich, that it was a decision made locally. And it was my husband that actually said to me, oh, sounds like someone's about to be scapegoated.
Yeah.
And I said, but that's not the point. And then the second sign came up literally within 24 hours. I was like, oh, this really is a national decision. And you really do have to sit there and go, nationally, Boots have probably got a branding consultant. They've got some kind of team around their brand, because that's the size that they are. They have brand consistency, because all companies that have brands that side will have brand guidelines, which means somewhere in a booklet somewhere is the brand guideline for their disabled parking signs. And it's at some point someone's changed it from disabled to less abled.
And so, I mean, how do you think? I mean, I have a really good guess, but but we'll cover it anyway. Why do you think that it just happened? You know, who are they not talking to? Why are they not talking to them?
This comes back to this uncomfortable feeling that everybody gets when they consider disability. Is it means you're aiming something at a particular marginalised group, but they've also decided not to actually speak to that marginalised group, which is disabled people, or even disabled disability consultants. It's not like they're not easy to find. You just have to stick it on LinkedIn. There's loads of them who are actually disabled. And then I think it all comes back to this uncomfortable feeling that everybody has when we start thinking about disability and disabled as a whole. And I think that's where I sit, is I became disabled a decade ago. It's before that, it's not something I ever thought about. As I walked down a high street and I walked into a shop, was that I had to lift my foot to get into the shop. And it's at the very basic level of disabilities, wheelchairs. Obviously, there's a whole cacophony of disabilities. But then suddenly when you don't have the ability to lift your foot to walk into this shop and you're on wheels, it becomes very blatantly obvious just how much people don't talk about disability at all. And whenever you bring the conversation up, there's this uncomfortableness that kind of permeates the air around you.
What do you think Boots should do now?
I honestly think they need to look at their diversity, equity, and DEI. Inclusion. Oh yeah, I believe that word's inclusion or inclusivity. That last one that's got the I. That I'm going to be very snarky here and go, how about actually including us? It just seems so obvious to me. I mean, like, so obvious that if you're looking at your DEI team and none of the people you are talking about are on that team, you've not got a DEI team. Because all these big corporations have them now, haven't they? These team of people that they go to make sure that everything's, here comes the word, politically correct. In this world that is changing so fast on so many levels, if you're looking at your DEI team and you haven't got the very marginalised groups that they are supposed to be including, literally making up that team, it is not a DEI team. It is a team of people that you have sent to sit in a classroom. And I've looked up DEI courses because obviously since the photograph went viral, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. I can get a DEI certificate in as little as about 2 to 4 hours. How on earth?
That's when it becomes a tick box exercise.
It is absolutely 100% this. And then you kind of go, and then I went down the absolute rabbit hole of, oh my goodness. I went down the disability confident mark, which is again a tick box exercise for companies. So when you look at those lovely disability confident signs that these companies have, it's so easy for them to get them if they've got the money with which to purchase it. And then there's 2 levels where they actually have to meet certain guidelines, but none of the companies that I looked up have actually met the secondary list of guidelines. And then the rabbit hole just it's bottomless. At this point, it is literally no longer a rabbit hole. This is a bottomless pit of disability. And I think that's pretty much where my heart went when I realized that's how easy it is for these companies to appear to be doing, and they are appearing to be doing, but they're actually doing nothing. It's very easy even now for Boots to go, oh no, look, we've changed the sign. Great, but how are you going to stop it from happening next time?
Yeah, and how are you going to train those people who made the decision that it was okay to put that there, because they're now going to make another mistake?
Yes, and it might not even be the disability community. The DEI team deals with everything that is
that whole diversity, equality, quite.
Right, so anything that's not considered British, mainstream. I'm being very politically correct with my words now because I don't want to irritate anybody. When I'm talking about marginalised groups, there are lots of marginalised groups, and if you've got a DEI team, if that team is not, you pull them all into a room and you look across the faces in front of you. If the team itself is not representing the actual group that they are supposed to be, you're talking about allyship at this point. If they're not actually made up of those people, how can they possibly understand the nuances of being in that group?
Do you think any retailers are getting it right or on the way to getting it right?
do you know what? I took my 17-year-old son to Sainsbury's the other day, and it's just called blue badge parking.
Mhm.
And from that very basic level, it's spot on.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Sainsbury's has other issues. So no,
Yeah.
no, not a single company I would say is actually getting this right across the board. I've been to the Science Museum recently, which was phenomenal. Can I just say, there's loads of lifts, but there's no signage to find the lifts. I got permission by email to take my assistant's dog. I know I don't need permission to take my assistant's dog into these places. Because my assistant's dog is a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel Cross Poodle, I make it a point to email beforehand. She's a psychiatric dog. She's because I've got complex post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD, and autism, although I didn't know about the autism at the point that I was deciding to get this assistance dog. So I've cleared it. I've gone in and had a bag search. I've shown my ticket. So at no point have I gone into the Science Museum and not been manhandled in some way by several people. And I'm still in the middle of an exhibition on the science fiction exhibition, by the way, was absolutely phenomenal. And this security guard comes up to me and goes, "Oh, what type of dog is that?" And I went, "It's a Cavadoodle." And he goes, "No, that's not what I meant." I went, "But that's what you asked." And he said, "What makes you think you can bring a dog in the museum?" I remember thinking, because she's an assistance dog. Oh yes, that's the words I was looking for. Thanks very much. And off he walks. And I remember thinking, why didn't you just ask? Is she an assistance dog? And secondary, on what level could I possibly have got into the museum, being you've got to have your bags checked, go through security, show your ticket, and also my ticket to get into the sci-fi exhibition because it's a paid exhibition. So I've been, I've had to have actual face-to-face contact with at least 3 people to have been sat where I was sat in my wheelchair. Why is he even asking? Why is he pinging me out of the exhibition that I've paid to be in to ask me why I've brought a dog in the museum when quite clearly it's emblazoned all over her jacket? And 2, I've spoken to 3 people to even get into the exhibition. I presume that if I wasn't allowed an assistance dog in the museum, which obviously I am because it's a legal requirement, one of them would have asked, "Is she an assistance dog?" I couldn't have been sat where I was without at least 3 people having seen the fact I got a dog sat on my lap.
It does make you think, was it just ignorance? Was it just, was it lack of trust in all of his colleagues? Just why did he have to do that, really?
Oh, here comes the trust question. Yeah, that's something that bear in mind, I've only become a wheelchair user about 10 years ago. The wrath of people who aren't disabled at disabled people just existing in public has definitely gotten worse over the last decade. 10 years ago, people would have opened doors for me. It would have been people commenting on my hair color, because it's one of the reasons I dye my hair is because sat in a wheelchair, people just don't see you. I travel at, I love this. There's a blog somewhere that says traveling at fart height. And it really does sum up the experience when you're sat in a wheelchair, because you are at that height, bum height. I travel around the world at bum height. And the whole conversation around disability, instead of it becoming something about, it's just a normal part of the human condition, it went downhill very quickly over the last 10 years. I know why.
Why do you think it is?
So about 10 to 12 years ago, there was a change in government that decided they would overhaul the benefit system. And it changed from disability living allowance to personal independence payments. Now, to make that change palatable for the human race in this country, a lot of conversations were had around fraud and how there were so many people fraudulently claiming disability benefits. As somebody who couldn't get, even as a wheelchair user, couldn't get disability benefits because I wasn't considered disabled enough.
Yeah, in fact, I remember this.
Horrific journey.
Yeah, because Ian Duncan Smith, who was Secretary of State for WP at the time, and I remember going to see him because he is my MP. Actually, most people who have got an issue or needed help with their benefits or were trying to move house so that they weren't caught out by what was colloquially called the bedroom tax and all of those kinds of things, I thought, do you know what, I'm just going to go and I'm going to record it. And I did record it and I put it on the YouTube channel. And I asked him a lot of things about, the organisations that were involved in sort of telling people that they were, fit to work when they were in hospital and, all those kinds of things. He just did not get it. He did not get it. And I went back a second time and had another go. But I think you're right that all that time didn't help. There were programs on the telly going, oh, look at all these benefit frauds, Benefit Street, wasn't there? And, you know, those kind of programs. But where's the other end of actually there's £3 billion not claimed in benefits. Where's, you know, there's people who are totally and utterly.
It's not even that. Do you know what? The figures they originally used to say how about there was all this fraud going on in the British benefit system. There was masses and masses of fraud. And it kept going on and on and on about scroungers and people who weren't disabled who were, the fakers. The fakers, that's what it is. The fakers. We're all faking it. But when you actually looked at the numbers, I believe it was 20p out of every £100.
Yeah, it was mad. And yeah,
and then you actually divided that down as to what was included in the 20p out of every £100. Now, what they included was all the tax credit overpayments, all the mistakes that they had made, not us. And let's face it, with tax credits, that's thousands. All the people that had got bonuses at work that year and were now in an overpayment on their tax credit were included. Obviously, fraud was obviously also included. But when you actually asked them what the actual breakdown was, they couldn't produce it. And even to this day, a decade later, that still really winds me up that even to this day, they still couldn't tell you actually what percentage of people claiming disability living allowance were faking their disability. Because I'm pretty sure I can probably count on one hand the amount of people that actually was.
Yeah, and of course, people assessing them had, you know, were not doctors. They were just using a checklist, and it's
still a checklist.
And what's interesting though is that the same scrutiny is not applied to the completely other end of the tax fraud of the really rich. You know, how many millions are being wasted there?
The same checkbox isn't even applied to the people getting government contracts. You've got people, and this is really, really relevant. You've got the whole COVID pandemic where they were supplying these £1 billion contracts to people to produce PPE that was supposed to be used in our hospitals to literally save the people who were turning up at work every day to deal with the people who were actually dying. And they never even produced PPE that could be used. Billions where's the refund? If I bought PPE, right, from my local shop, you know, I buy rubber gloves, and I get them home and they're not usable, you take them back to the shop and get your refund. Now, why is this not the same with government contracts? Why is it we can't get a refund from these companies who've had billions of taxpayers' money? Oh, I'm really getting on the rant.
Well, no, absolutely.
Where's the refund?
I think there are a lot of people still wondering that. And where are the court cases? You know, where are the court cases?
For supplying products unfit for purpose. It was not fit for purpose. So here I am, and now the personal independence process is absolutely degrading. It is humiliating, and it has been purposely set up that way so we don't apply. So I'll be damned if I'm not going to apply. So I did. And yes, I do get it. I get enhanced both, and I'm not ashamed of that because it's specifically designed in the UK for disabled people. You can claim it whether you're working or you're not. So even if I got an income of Amazon CEO proportions, I can still technically claim PIP, which I agree with, because there is a disability tax just for existing. And that was the point of DLA and personal independence payment, is because the government at some point in the past recognised the fact that just being and existing costs us more. It costs us more in our electricity bills. It costs us more in our diesel. It costs us more in our water because I have to wash sheets more often, because I have to wear pads. Again, not embarrassed, because it is just part of being disabled. It's not anything that stops me from doing what I want to do. I still do everything I want to do. My quality of life is still incredibly good, although every time my PIP renewal is due, I can't say the same, because I know what's going to happen. I'm going to have some person sat in my living room staring me in absolute astonishment because they've never dealt with their internalized ableism, that I can't peel a carrot.
And I think it really comes back to what we were saying about Boots and other retailers, is that if you don't involve the right people who it affects in those decision makings, in developing those forms, then it's all going to go wrong, which is what happened.
It reinforces the ableism.
Yeah, and they clearly haven't had the training, they haven't had anything really, making decisions about things they know nothing about.
No one's ever sat them down and gone, what's your internal bias and perceptions on this group of people? Because they clearly haven't, because if they had, they'd never have put less. You never call a human being less.
No, quite. I mean, there were lots of all sorts of sort of things about the whole story that you highlighted, and of course now it's probably going quiet again, so we don't know whether Boots are going to look at the rest of their signs. I've asked but didn't get a reply.
Yeah, I've asked,
how it happened.
Got a response.
No, I've asked, how did this happen? How are you going to ensure it doesn't happen again? And I've not had a reply to that, and I've chased. So it will be interesting to see what happens. We'll pick it up maybe in 6 months' time and see, see if it is still. But there were other issues as well, because it's one of the things was that people actually took your image as well, didn't they?
And it's always within the community, which is so frustrating, is, yes, I'm disabled. I'm a disabled photographer. I'm a disabled person who's actually raised the complaint. And then you've got disability consultants, or DEI as well, who just, and I presume they've right-clicked and saved my image. Why they couldn't just repost and comment like everyone else has done? Everybody in the community has done that. Repost with quote, and they've added their 10 penneth worth, which is exactly what you're supposed to do, because it allows us, when we are pushing for change, to keep an eye on the numbers. Everything's a numbers game. And then people like disabled charities also, they take the photograph, and it's so frustrating because it really isn't that hard to do a reverse image. And I did it myself to see, oh look, I come up. Wow, imagine that. It's not hard to do an image search. It's not hard to go, well, I'll do a search on Twitter for Boots parking sign, or LinkedIn for Boots parking sign, and see what comes up. And you can follow it back to the original person. If lots of people are sharing one person's post, how hard is it to realize and contact that person and go, is this your photograph? Why did you take it? What does this mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, I found it amazing that sort of disability campaigners, disability organisations were not retweeting you and were taking the photo and then tweeting it, because actually that takes more effort than clicking retweet.
It really does. And I think this comes down to, they want to be seen to be doing, oh, look, here we go again. But don't actually want to put the work in to actually do it. And it's important, obviously, that these things get the numbers. It's really important it gets reposted, retweeted, reshared. We don't get change without volume.
Yeah.
But when I go to Boots and go, well, if they didn't change the sign, I've got to be able to continue it and go, well, actually 100,000 people on LinkedIn alone have viewed, acknowledged, or commented on this. But I can't do that if you just take the photograph without the person who did it. Besides which, it's just so disrespectful.
Well, that's it. I just think it was really rude, breach of copyright, very lazy in some respects where it was reported, where people hadn't looked properly and hadn't sort of looked fully at things. Because I know there was another one who completely credited you, and she got over 100,000 views and comments, and so that was a big one. That was a really big one that helped the story.
Absolutely,
but it was full credit to you. So,
exactly. And I think. Yeah. It's so important, and I think it becomes more important when you're talking about marginalised groups, is to make sure you keep a thread going to the original person. Because to me, it's not just a sign. To me, it's not just about consultancy and advocacy. To me, I'm sat in my chair staring at this sign that Boots have decided was appropriate, and it's personal. Business is personal. Business has always been personal, because business is made up of people. Therefore, it is personal.
This is very difficult to know what to say anymore, isn't it? Really, because it's so rude, isn't it? It's just at the very basic level. It's all of this is just really rude.
It's just rude, and it comes down to, when it's about disability, the terminology is ableism, and it's external and internal ableism. The external is obvious to see. It surrounds us every day. You only have to walk down the high street to see, within the planning department, the lack of even, we're not even an afterthought of disabled people. We're the ones having to make changes retroactively, because every time we go anywhere, they haven't even thought about us at the planning department, let alone, oh, hang on a minute, how is a disabled person going to get in? Norwich Market's a great example of that. It was actually wheelchair accessible before, and then Norwich City Council decided they were going to overhaul the entire market to make it new and shiny and excellent, but it's now stepped. Although I can go up the lanes, I can't get into any of the actual units. So they have pop-up shops, and there's an artist as well. It was one of the things I was looking to do, was have a pop-up shop. And being that it is run by Norwich City Council, I genuinely just thought when I booked it, they'd have a ramp. It never occurred to me, it never occurred to me, even in a million years, that Norwich City Council, who runs the pop-up shop for the Norwich Market, which we've had in Norwich for hundreds of years, a market, it never even dawned on me that the units wouldn't be in some way wheelchair accessible. But no, so I had my money refunded, which is all very well and nice, but I actually wanted the pop-up shop. And I'd not actually like is Norwich City Council to consider the fact that wheelchair people actually exist.
And they've excluded, they have absolutely excluded a great number of people. I mean, I would say, have they been challenged on the Equality Act on that?
I don't have the time, money or energy, and let's face it, that's what they count on. They all count on it. For me to take it to court, it requires money because legal aid no longer exists. It requires time, and no offence, I'm a busy disabled parent with disabled kids who runs a business helping people. I also art paint in my spare time, and I really just don't have the time. And then there's the energy. And
that's the thing, it does take a lot of time and energy. I just wondered if anyone had just asked them for a comment on, did they feel they were breaking the
no. And Helen, if you feel like it, you're more than welcome.
I will do. When was when was this done?
I tried to get a pop-up shop in 2020, when COVID happened. I tried to get a pop-up shop end of 2019, beginning of 2020, because 2020 was my big year to have exhibitions for my art, and then all the exhibitions got cancelled.
Yeah.
Because of COVID.
And nothing has changed in the area.
No, nothing's changed. I don't have the end. I don't even think I've got you get to a point when you just get weary of fighting it all the time. The Boots parking sign was just so in my face.
It's just amazing there that the market, that if that happened in 2020 and they haven't made any improvements, and they must have known because you got your money back. So
I know. And I apparently wasn't the first one either.
Yeah, so they do know about it, and they haven't made any changes in 3 years.
No,
incredible, isn't it? It is incredible. It's just this blatant sort of ignorance of apathy, isn't it?
It's apathy, and I think it's because they don't think we're people. I don't know how to explain it. There's this thing with disability, is there's this infantilization where we're all children. We're not allowed to swear.
Well, you can swear. I don't. You swear as much as you like.
Doesn't go down very well with a woman who's 46 and is perimenopausal.
Yeah.
But we're forever. I mean, even going. This is what I mean. I've been in the chair now 10 years, and even something as simple as going into a shop. I go into a clothing store, right? And I've popped around on my wheelchair or my mobility scooters I had a few years ago because I wasn't psychologically ready for the wheelchair, and that's a whole nother story of internalized ableism, because we go on our own journey through disability. You get to the till, right? Now at the time I can remember having my son with me, and this, you're talking 5, 6, 7 years ago, so he would have been about 10, 11. So we've gone up to the counter. I got my great big bag of clothing and I unload it onto the counter, and they ping it all through. And then they look at my son, who's 10, and they tell him how much it is.
Oh, that's the classic, does he take sugar?
And it's like, yes, it is, but for God's sake, 2023.
Yeah, I mean, the classic does he take sugar story, you know, people do that. I mean, that was decades ago, but it hasn't changed.
Nothing has changed, and nothing will change for as long as people go, oh, I'm uncomfortable about having this conversation, so I'm just not going to have it. Sit in their bloody uncomfortableness. For God's sake, it's enough already. Enough already. I've had enough. I'm weary. I'm tired. I'm bone grindingly tired. And I've only been in the wheelchair 10 years. People that have been born into their chairs who are in their 50s, 60s and 70s. I mean, honestly, they've been banging their heads against walls forever.
It's just, yeah. I mean, we just keep fighting. I mean, on a more positive note, because I feel we should end on a positive note, because we could probably rant for a very long time.
Very long time.
on a more positive note, tell people about what it is that you do.
Why do I do it as well? Why do I do it? Well, the whole discussion explains why I do it. A few years ago, I ended up in hospital because I got so overwhelmed, tired and bone weary of life that I ended up with my gastric system completely stopping. And I remember being in this hospital ward. I was only in there 48 hours on this massive drip that they couldn't put through any faster if they tried. And I'm sat on this ward with this very weird mixed group of women, and we're all just nattering away. And I think it was for the first time in my life, I'd actually got to, in my adult life, that I'd got to stop. You know, they literally just bring you food. It's great. You just sit there thinking. And I can only explain it as I had a bit of a eureka moment. I was a business mentor years ago, came out and retrained as a life coach. And I'm the least life coachy person on the planet. But I don't know anybody who's like me. I'm gobby, I'm loud, I'm moody as all hell. And I trained as a life coach and I specialized, I niched. My niche are women of my age who've just got a diagnosis. Who knew the niche existed? So I help people deal with their internalized ableism, external ableism. I help them basically come to terms with, mostly it's neurodivergent, late diagnosed, perimenopausal women, which I think is hilarious. We are a very particular bunch who've managed to get this far in life without even realizing we're neurodivergent. Now, for me, that's autism and ADHD. For a lot of the women I speak to, it's ADHD, autism, a mix of the both, or something else as well, or all of the above. And Peri has a very particular way of taking your brain and scrambling it. And when you're neurodivergent, everything just collapses. You can't even think straight. And I think your whole life kind of falls apart. I mean, obviously I ended up in hospital because of it. And I don't want anyone to have to go through that alone, because I did. And there's so much, once you realize what it is that's been holding you back, it's like someone tips all the hurdles over on a run, you know. Mm-hmm. They're still there, the hurdles, but because you know they're there, we can work out how to go around them instead of over them or through them or under them, or in my case at this moment in time, I'm smacking them over because I've had enough of them. So that's what I do. Adaptation and acceptance. So acceptance, obviously coming to accept who you are, what makes you up, and how you can use that to your best ability, and adapt everything else, because the world isn't built for us. But I'll be damned if that's going to stop me or any of my clients.
Absolutely, that's what we like to hear. So where can people find you?
I do all my coaching online because Zoom's phenomenal, and that's what I use. It means you don't have to come to me. It means you can do it in the comfort of your own home, which for a lot of us is a lot more accessible. And if you can't do Zoom, I also do text-based coaching, because a lot of people don't deal with video or phone calls, but text-based is something I also do. I have Discord and Telegram and Signal, and whatever you find the most accessible, I'll learn how to do it so I can help you. But I'm online. I've got a website, but I'm known as neurodivergent coach. And if you stick that in Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, I am there. I don't rant as much as I perhaps should, but I am there.
People love rants. People love rants.
Yes, I think I should rant more. I think it's coming. I've hit that tipping point of the boot sign. I think was just the last. It was definitely the last straw.
You definitely do rants. I do rants. People like rants. I do rants on Instagram. People like them because they sort of identify with them quite a lot, even if it's just, you know, your everyday thing. They identify with them.
You know what? I think I've just come up with a name for the last straw. Is actually very apt, because I use straws and then they banned them. Okay. So friggin' phenomenally wrong. I can't even. So I am there. I just don't like seeing myself on the camera. So I will get in my head.
Yeah, you just have to get over there. I just don't watch it. I mean, do it and then just don't watch it.
No, I like your idea. This is brilliant. Audio.
Yeah. No one can see your face. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. To say nothing of being able to edit stuff out when you go wrong. But well, that's
I probably won't bother.
It's yeah, really, this was 3 hours long.
Yes, and now it's only 2 minutes. Like all my TikToks.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to say the Instagram, when I started doing ranty reels on Instagram, and you had to reduce to 30 seconds, I couldn't do it. I could not.
I don't know, how can you possibly have a rant in? I'd probably get the first sentence out. This is the last straw, and that would be it.
And now they've lengthened it, and I can do longer reels now. So I find it far easier to rant now. Just normal rant. That, you know, but when you have to be reduced to 30 seconds, I think one of my first rants was about being reduced to 30 seconds of ranting. Like, well, that's not helpful, Instagram, is it really?
No,
giving me 30
not
seconds.
at all.
It's just, you know, defeats the object.
But ranting is good for your mental health. Everybody should have it.
I'm a great believer in ranting being good for your mental health, because it gets it out of your system. You're not internalizing it.
Yes,
definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Kezza. I think you and I could probably talk for hours and put the world to rights and everything else.
We'll sort it.
Yeah, everything else, definitely. So, but I hope everyone found that useful and interesting, and thank you for listening. And if you have a topic you'd like me to discuss on the show, you can email me on helen@eastlondonradio.org.uk, and you can find me on the website, thecomplainingcow.co.uk, for information on consumer issues, including rights, money-saving matters, and all the other episodes of The Complaining Cow Show on East London Radio. And you can find me on Twitter @ComplainingCow and The Complaining Cow on Instagram and Facebook. And you can get 15% off the books, How to Complain, the Essential Consumer Guide to Getting Refunds, Redress and Results, and 101 Habits of an Effective Complainer, with the code ELRCOW on the website. Thanks very much. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.